we touched on this, which is like, okay, staking's low, and there's talks about real staking versus, we could call it, subsidized staking maybe, and that it kind of, to me, feels the same as almost like the AtmaIO discussion, right? And the AtmaIO discussion is like, okay, so we've got this use case. The HBAR Foundation is giving Atma HBAR to pay for their use case, but also Rob Allen on the governing council is telling us that, Atma has really invested substantially in their infrastructure for the use case. So the question is Atma going to keep using Hedera after the use case is no longer subsidized? And all these kind of questions come to mind. To me, it feels kind of the same way with staking, right? Which is, okay, so on one side, we've got a camp that's like, let's just do real staking, right? Let's have the network dictate the staking based off of in and out, right? That equilibrium that you've brought up that we'll touch on shortly, but the real staking. But then you look at the benefits of the subsidized element of AtmaIO, and it's like, to your point, wow, 70 billion transactions. Like what a efficient marketing spend, you could say, because it's going right back into the network, right? It's not like we're giving Atma a bunch of money and they're selling HBAR to pay employees. That HBAR is cycling right back into treasury, and right back into people staking to the network. So that's an interesting dynamic. You take that thinking and bring it back to staking, and you go, well, what if, Hedera or some other organization were to dump, a couple 100 million HBAR into account 800 or whatever? It's like, well, that just kind of cycles back into the ecosystem. It's not like governing council members are staking, and well, they are staking, but they don't get rewards. But, it's definitely great marketing for the network. I mean, HBAR with a 6.5% yield is very attractive versus a 0.2% yield. So do you kind of see it that way? Like as an example of like a bit of analogous to AtmaIO and then subsidized staking?
Yeah. I sometimes read the, comments in, Reddit or other social media forums. And it's, there's the criticism that Atma doesn't pay for its transactions, but people want, higher staking rewards. The subsidized Atma transactions, as you point out, feed into the staking. So yeah. You subsidize Atma, you subsidize the staking rewards.
Right.
So if you don't want to subsidize Atma, then you kind of sacrifice. You take those HBAR from Atma and put them directly into the staking account. That doesn't make sense. But on the Atma, I'm not that concerned about. My sense is, and I don't know this for certain, but Atma is a platform that existed before they connected Hedera to it. They have 30 billion connected products. Hedera is a feature of Atma. And what I think might be going on is that Atma itself is a platform, and then you have to develop applications on top of Atma. And it very well could be that Atma has its own customers that are developing their own, applications on top of the network that use Hedera, and these HBARs that go to Atma then are given to their own customers that are developing their own. So it's to support Atma's customers as they develop their applications that use the DLT. I mean, I have zero concern that Atma is going to, disconnect Hedera and say, yeah, nobody wants or needs, the DLT features. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, when you look at kind of the regulatory path that the world seems to be on with carbon tracking and trading and digital product passports, and the carbon, the emission scope 1, 2, and 3. The need for things like Hedera are only growing. I mean, those things are not optional. Those aren't
Yeah.
features that maybe we include, maybe we don't. I mean, if they're required from a regulatory standpoint, then it becomes how do we implement it? How do we implement it cost effectively? And I think that's why Hedera is plugged into Atma, and then you got the Guardian, which is plugged into Hedera, and but I think the mistaken thinking is that as soon as Atma turned on the Hedera functionality, there were applications already running on Atma that needed Hedera. I think those applications then needed to be built by Atma's customers, and so so I think it's that kind of that's where the subsidized HBAR comes from. It's not to encourage Atma not to disconnect Hedera or to keep giving them free HBAR or else they won't use it, or any of those kind of scenarios. I think it's very much just kind of a pump priming.
Gotcha. Yeah, people talk about the carts and horses and chickens and eggs, and this is really what it's about. It's Avery Dennison, governing council member, AtmaIO, under Avery Dennison, and it's not like they're just going to be able to give this new offering to the customers and say, hey, here's this new thing, and go through that whole cycle. To your point, this is, you could view it as kind of like a free trial for their customers, or a subsidized trial, or just them being able to say, hey, hook this in, get the benefits of this, get hooked to this new service from AtmaIO. And it's very interesting that you bring up kind of the regulatory components and the SOC 1, 2, and 3, is because the other interesting side to this is it's not just kind of saying, hey, this might be popular in the future. You're legally going to be required to record these types of data in this fashion. And so that's the other interesting element to this, is truly it's a matter of when, not if. And the missing ingredient is, can Hedera get out in the forefront seemingly at any cost and making good enough progress? So I share your sentiment that I'm not too worried about AtmaIO. I don't know what the chances are of another deal like that happening, but I think it was necessary for many different reasons. And just from a marketing standpoint, I'm not going to turn my nose up at 70 billion transactions.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I mean, I think there's the implementation of Hedera in business processes is, and the efficiencies, everything, it just makes good business sense. It's not simply a regulatory kind of driven obligation. There's one piece of the Atma ecosystem that I think is really tremendous, which is Wiliot, which is a IoT application. They make battery-free Bluetooth transmitters that roll off.
How does that work?
They're like, it's ambient energy.
Gotcha. Okay.
It is one of the coolest. I thought it was, when I first read it, I had to make sure I wasn't reading April 1 kind of.
Same as Hashgraph, like, this can't be this good.
It's an amazing, and I saw a interview with, that Max Winograd did with somebody from Wiliot, and it sounds like the idea for Atma came from Wiliot.
Gotcha.
From what Wiliot was doing. So it's just there's a really interesting relationship there. Avery Dennison manufactures the Wiliot Bluetooth tags. These things are like postage stamps. But you can connect them. You can connect them to virtually anything, and you're not looking at Internet of Things where you need radio gateways and all the other high equipment, expensive equipment. They can measure temperature and humidity and on vegetable crates, and but the amount of information and efficiency that that kind of technology brings into food supply chains, the amount of waste it eliminates. Again, it's not just a regulatory requirement, but it just makes good economic sense. And those
Huge.
guys, they call themselves the Internet of Trillions.
Yeah.
And that's a piece of so that's another piece of Atma. That's another connected piece to Atma. So I don't really worry about Hedera's stickiness within Atma. I mean, I just think Atma is in its infancy, and it's gonna grow, and as it does, so will the Hedera transactions.
I love that. Yeah, I really appreciate you kind of taking this deep dive on Atma kind of unexpectedly, because it is one of those things that I feel this community and this ecosystem, it is such a big piece of our ecosystem, but we've kind of gone like, all right, whatever, let's move on kind of thing. But it is worth kind of still lingering on it a little bit, because there is more to unpack. It's not like AtmaIO switched it on and has done nothing. Their parent company and them have continued to innovate in different ways. So I appreciate that. I want to steer the conversation into a new area, but I think I appreciate kind of diving in on AtmaIO.